No, that's the one. There you go, it's 2 o'clock now. West of the line. So it's Allen Street. Yep. Sorry. Good afternoon, welcome to everybody. This is the meeting Northern Plan Committee. I am Councillor Paul Wynne, Chairman of the committee. Some housekeeping. We're not expecting a fire drill today. In the event of an alarm sounding, please leave the building and gather at the front of the building. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Because I'll also ask you to please ensure that mobile phones are switched off and ensure the volume on your laptop is muted. To ensure the members of this committee and all points raised by the public speakers are properly heard, I must advise you this is not to tolerate any disruptive behaviour. It's a meeting held in public, not a public meeting. And if such behaviour takes place and persists, I will adjourn the meeting. Members should ensure that they are present throughout the meeting, as you cannot vote on any item if you've not heard all the debate. Can members and officers introduce themselves each time before they speak, so those listening know who is speaking? I shall ask now members of the committee and officers to introduce themselves. Julie, you'd like to start, please?
Julian Dean, member for Foregate. Nat Green, Quarry and Coating. Ted Clark, Basin Republic of. Royal Crofts, Market Drayton, East.
Go to David.
Steve Duckford at Martin's, Littlestone and Littlestone East.
Jeff Elder, Ellesmere Urban.
Roger Evans, London Division.
Vince Hunt, London Vice Chair.
Planning and Development Services Manager. Sarah Robinson, Planning Officer.
Philip Mullen, Youth Development Manager.
Beatrice Iqbal, Solicitor.
And Emily Marshall, Committee Officer.
Thank you very much. Do we have any apologies for absence? I think we have one, don't we? Alex Wagner. We have no substitute. Minutes to confirm the minutes of the meeting of the Northern Planning Committee held on 6th of July 2024, attached Mark 2. Can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Vince. Thank you, Wagner. Public question time. Do you have any questions? No. Disclosable peculiar interest. Do you have any? Okay. So we'll move on to item 5. Rose Meadow, Maysby Road, Industrial Estate. And opposite. Would you please start?
Yes, Sarah Robinson. So we have the application for the installation of a solar farm at Rose Meadow in Maysby Road, Oswestry. The application is submitted by the council and therefore requires committee determination. The site indicated in red is a 4 hectare site, which is a former refuse tip in the centre of Maysby Industrial Estate. The land is identified as urban. The solar panels will actually only lie on approximately 2 hectares of the site, whilst part of the remainder of the land will be provided for biodiversity net gain on site. So here's a photograph looking south over the site in the rough location of where the solar panels will be located. And this one is further up the site, looking across to where the proposed access will be, well, retaining the existing access, sorry. And here's along the main road, and the application site then is on the left-hand side. And here you can, the site will be located beyond that building behind the trees and will then supply to Arlo, which is located then behind that building in the photograph. No objections have been raised by consultees in relation to the application. It's considered that the proposal complies with relevant planning policies and therefore approval is recommended.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay, didn't you indicate to speak?
I'll take it in public or.
No, there's no speakers.
Hey, Chair. Actually, I'm very well acquainted with this particular area. Obviously, Alter Street is my main shopping area, and the industrial estate has agricultural suppliers and other businesses all around it. Actually, it's really odd looking at the first few pictures, which very much gave the impression of being an open field. There, I mean, you'd think that could be in the middle of the countryside. It isn't. Those trees that you see in the distance actually have industrial buildings or roads pretty well much either side of them. Personally, I welcome this application. The electricity, as I say, the site is right in the middle of an industrial estate. Arla, which is one of the local companies, will be using said electricity. I think it's a really good example of how a solar farm can be. We get so many that are actually in open countryside. Obviously, we give them significant weighting to a degree because they are for renewables, and actually this is a really good site. You can probably see from the picture that's up there now, the open field that you're looking at actually is an old landfill site in the middle of the industrial estate. So I'm quite happy to support this. Yeah, I propose.
Julian?
Thank you. Yeah, Julian Dean from Port Hill. Yes, I'm going to be supporting this, but I just want to ask about the management of the cap on the old landfill site and potential contamination. Let's sort of scan through some of the conditioning, but I just think it'd be useful for the committee to understand that in a little bit more detail. There's been some, more and more concern around old landfill sites recently. There's a campaign around something called Zane's Law following an incident where there was serious contamination. So clearly there needs to be monitoring and proper management of the site. So I think it'd be helpful for us to understand that. But assuming that's going to be well done, then I'm very happy to support.
So regulatory services were consulted on this and requested that a condition be attached to the approval for the monitoring of the site. And the Environment Agency have also been consulted and have also requested a similar worded condition to ensure that the site is monitored, and if there are any issues with the cap, that is remedied immediately. And I can't remember which condition it is. However, the condition secures that it's monitored and any issues are remedied. I hope that answers the question.
Is there any reason why half the site's been developed? Is that because of environmental issues, or is there any proposals to be able to increase the area of the site in future?
So the main reason for the reduction was the biodiversity net gain. So when the application originally came in, it did include the entire red site area. Right. However, the provision of biodiversity net gain has reduced it. Once the biodiversity net gain, there may be potential to review it. However, with the area of the site that would need biodiversity net gain, then when you create further, it's trying to find that area of land then for the biodiversity net gain provisions.
Thank you very much.
Ted?
I may be completely off beam because I'm usually off beam. There was a suggestion there was a winter camp for caravans somewhere there. Could you tell me whereabouts that is, or approximately from where you're sitting?
Glover's Meadow is located
where my mouse
where that mouse is. So basically the access track just goes past the Glover's Meadow accommodation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thanks, Julie.
Just a comment when I was reading it, the suggestion was also that the reduction in size was simply because they're more efficient solar panels, and the energy requirement was now going to be met by a smaller site.
That's also correct. So originally in the entire red outlines what they needed to provide the 2 megawatt outage. However, as you said, they've also been able to reduce that because of the better provision of the solar panels, and also they need the additional space for the biodiversity net gain provision. Thank you.
Okay, then we have a motion seconded. So I think we'll have a show of hands on this one. So that's okay. Yep. Yeah. So all those in favour, please show. Unanimous? Okay. Right, we'll move on to item 6. Proposed residential belonging to land off northwest of Honey Pot Farm. Philip, you present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes. But this application is made in outline with all matters reserved for future consideration for a single dwelling on land northwest of Honey Spot Farm, Rose Hill, Stoke Heath. Let me get to the slide, sorry. There are no updates on this application. The application site is outlined in red here on the slide. That's the application site. A location plan outlined in red in relationship to the surrounding area. The officers consider it represents an infill site. I've shown it in larger scale, the built structures either side. An indicative block plan of what a dwelling may look like in relation to the site with a detached garage. However, as I've indicated, that's indicative only, as all matters are reserved for future consideration. Aerial plan, photograph of the site in relation to the surrounding area. Obviously, the proposed site outlined in red. Another aerial photograph. There's a site there outlined red, Honey Spot Farm, which is part of there. Now some photographs of the site taken from the adjacent public highway. There's a total site entrance in there. There's the plot in there. Photograph of the site itself, and this is taken from the direction of Honey Spot Farm. Proposed site off the adjacent highway. And this plan indicates a further site along Rose Hill Road, which is outlined in red here, that was allowed an appeal, hatched in red. This appeal decision is attached to the officer's report as Appendix A, as the appeal was allowed. This application is brought to committee owing to the Parish Council's response, as outlined in paragraph 4.21 of the officer's report. In response to this, the Parish Council's comments with regards to the neighbourhood plan are noted. The settlement known as Stoke Heath is classed as a community hub in accordance with the SAMDEV. And while it has no designated development boundary, officers consider the site represents an infill site and as such generally in conformity with the local plan. Officers also consider the appeal decision as set out in Appendix A is a material consideration that weighs in favour of supporting the application. Officers' comment on the principle of development is set out in section 6.1 of the officer's report. Also, members need to note that the application site is only 75 metres in distance from the previous site allowed an appeal. And that also represented infill, as set out in paragraph 6.110 of the officer's report. Officers are aware of the exceedance in housing development guidelines for this settlement. However, the application is only for one dwelling, and as indicated, the housing numbers are guidelines only. And officers do not consider that this matter could be successfully dependent on appeal for the reasons as set out in paragraph 6.113 of the officer's report. While it is noted that there has been received a letter of objection from a member of the public, none of the statutory consultees object, and this includes environmental protection in respect of noise issues, as outlined in section 6.2 of the report. There are no objections in principle on highways and transportation issues, and members need to be aware that this matter forms part of the future reserve matters application. Also, no objections on drainage and ecological issues. The latter subject to conditions as set out in Appendix 2, in particular conditions 6, 7 and 8. In conclusion, the recommendation is one of approval, subject to the conditions as set out in Appendix 1 of the officer's report, and which will note in the application is in outline only, and therefore all matters reserved for future consideration. Officers are satisfied that the application does comply with the local plan and have also given consideration to the Stoke-on-Tern neighbourhood plan, as well as the National Planning Policy Framework, of course. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my presentation on this application.
Thank you, Philip. We have 2 speakers, 1 against, 1 for. First one is Councillor Sarah Hanson. Would you like to come forward, please? You have 3 minutes, Sarah. We have a clock there. We should start when you start speaking. You'd like to pull the mic towards you a bit, please. Sit, and it's a button on the right hand side.
Good afternoon. So I'm Councillor Sarah Planton. I'm Chairman of the Planning Committee for Stoke-upon-Tern Parish Council, and I appreciate this opportunity to address you this afternoon. I've read the very thorough report of the Planning Officer concerning this application, and I'm grateful that it identifies exactly why this application has been recommended for approval, despite, in our view, being contrary to our adopted neighbourhood plan. It would appear an element of confusion has arisen based on the interpretation of the term community hub, which the Planning Officer interprets differently to the Parish Council's intention within the neighbourhood plan. I can see how this has arisen. There is no formal definition of the term in the neighbourhood plan, but the intention should have been clear that in the use of the term immediately follows the reference to the Parish Council's proposed support for developments at Dutton Close and the Turnhill Base. It is these locations that the Parish Council considers to be the community hubs going forward, not the Stoke Heath community hub that is currently adopted Samdev uses. The fact that this is not recognised by Shropshire Council planning officers has only just become apparent to us, and we can only apologise for our amateur attempts at attempting to set a planning policy. I would appreciate it if the planning committee would consider our objection in the light of our intention that all our parish, other than the allocated sites shown on our plan map, is intended to be considered open countryside, as is proposed in the emerging draft Shropshire local plan, and that they refuse this application. If, however, the committee is minded to consider the application, as has been set out in the Planning Officer's report, I'd be grateful if you'd also consider the following. The Planning Officer refers to the Inspector's report to the recent appeal at Honeyspot Farm for a development in the same field as this development, and his view was that the development was, quotes, only a very modest additional breach of 1 dwelling in our housing allocation. But surely this has to be considered in light of the other developments that have been considered as limited infill and permitted in recent years. There are 45 properties in Rosehill Road, 9 of which have been permitted in the last 6 years. As a rural parish, we do not consider that a more than 20% increase in housing stock on one road should be considered limited infill, and cumulatively they are not, quotes, a very modest additional breach. Hence our intention to allocate all these areas as open countryside in our neighbourhood plan. Also, all the permitted houses, bar the recently approved Honeyspot Farm development, were built by the owners for their own residences. None were for speculative development, as this current one is. I would ask this application be refused.
Thank you, Sarah. Very good signing. Thank you. Okay, I'd like Steve Lott to come forward, please. You also have 3 minutes, and the clock will start when you start speaking, Steve. Okay? Button on the right hand side. That's it.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name's Stephen Locke. I'm the agent for the applicant, Mrs. Margaret McNulty, who's lived in Stoke Heath for many years. This application is a small-scale scheme for a single self-build dwelling, which is recommended for approval. The site is a clear infill plot located within the community hub of Stoke Heath, and community hubs have a vital role in achieving the spatial strategy for Shropshire, with limited infilling within the village being considered acceptable on suitable sites. The proposal is only for one self-build dwelling, and the officer report highlights the recently approved appeal decision on the single plot only 75 metres to the south of the application site. That is a key material planning consideration, and which found the site to align with the locational strategy for new residential development in the current development plan. We support the Shropshire Council Planning Officer's view that the site is considered to accord with the adopted planning policies and the wider housing strategy. And it's also important, we feel, to note the government's aim to significantly increase the supply of housing with the ambition of delivering another 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years. Obviously, this is a small, tiny percentage of that, but well-located infill plots such as this play an important role in meeting the need for more local and national housing. The government guidance also highlights that small and medium-sized builders are essential to meeting housing expectations and supporting the local economy, and it's sites such as this, a single plot, that helps keep local builders in business, and single plots can be built out relatively quickly. Overall, the location of the plot is an ideal for a single dwelling, and the officer report confirms that the council's public protection officer has not raised any objection on residential amenity grounds. The applicant is happy to accept the suggested conditions, and we would urge the committee to support the recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, I'll open to the floor. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Chairman. That's Gary Burton, Bagley. Beyond what the parish chairman said about overdevelopment, but the fact that something hasn't been built on a road, excuse me, over a number of years. Where do we stand policy-wise regarding that? Is it overdevelopment, or is each plan taken in its own merits?
Thank you, Philip Mullen. I hear what the parish council has said. Hence the reason we refused the previous application that went to appeal as subsequently allowed. And the conclusion to that appeal was there are no material considerations that indicate this appeal should be determined other than in accordance with the development plan for the reasons given. We have taken into consideration the local plan plus the emerging plan. However, the emerging plan has only got limited weight at present. It's the SAMDEV and the Shropshire local plan and the neighbourhood plans, so the key planning plans here. We've weighed them all up, and officers are of the opinion that this application should be approved. It is for an extra dwelling. I hear what the parish council say with regards exceeding the numbers, but they're guidelines only, and this is only one dwelling. It isn't that it's an estate for say 20, 30 more houses, so we don't consider one is going to have that big of an impact. I also hear what they're saying with regards to cumulative impacts, and I don't necessarily disagree with them. But again, weighing it up in light of what the inspector said with the appeal we defended unsuccessfully, we don't feel we could defend this one on appeal in light of that decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I suppose I think we should just be a bit more honest about this. We clearly didn't think we clearly thought that there'd been so much development in this area over and above the requirements of the previous local plan that new development was not sustainable or appropriate. We got overturned. We don't think it's appropriate under the new local plan, so we're caught between a rock and a hard place where we've got an emerging local plan and officers have decided that even that isn't enough to win it at appeal. That seems to me to be the honest appraisal of the situation, which is really unfortunate. I suppose we as a committee have to decide whether we want to be brave and to say no, let's stick to our guns and see if a second inspector takes a slightly different view, or whether we effectively roll over because we think we're going to lose it in appeal. That seems to be our decision. My temptation, because I know what you do, officers, is for us to refuse on this occasion and then make them come back, just so that at least we go through the motions of putting on a bit of a fight, because it just feels like we're just rolling over, and we have an emerging local plan which would have blocked it, and we're being caught at a particular moment in time, which is going to allow this to sneak through against the wishes of the community and without any established housing need, frankly.
Looking round. Sorry. Oh, sorry, Tabitha.
I was just going to say, to add to what Philip said, I think since that appeal decision, there's obviously we've had a new government with a new agenda, and they are reviewing the NPPF, and there's a very focused increase on housing. So I think that's adding weight to the rationale for this decision, that we are more minded to, we've put a recommendation for approval for, because there was an appeal decision before the consultation on the NPPF, and now that is adding weight to the case of that we've got the appeal decision plus this increased pressure on finding more additional homes, particularly in Shropshire. So that's another factor to consider since the appeal decision.
Can I just add, as I read out earlier, the inspector was clear in his conclusion on the previous one. He said there are no material considerations to go to allow to refuse it. Therefore, it wasn't even in the planning balance. In his mind, it was clear for approval. And was I hear what he said about the new local plan? That hasn't got the weight of the current plan, and therefore we have to base our decision on what policies are relevant today.
Thanks. Yeah.
Right. I agree to an extent with Julian. I'm not sure I would necessarily say that we've not been honest, because I think we have. I think Philip did say that we'd refuse the other one and why. And I don't necessarily see it as rolling over to the inspector. I think the inspector has been exceptionally clear about their interpretation of current policies and what our interpretation was. I don't think any of us particularly want to feel as though we're being, I wouldn't say coerced, but pushed into a particular box. But I think, just as Philip has said, the inspector wasn't ambiguous about the other one. He was very clear cut about it, and he said basically, you got it wrong. And I know there is a temptation, and I'm always chewing my fingernails at the thought of challenging an inspector. But I do think we need to remember that if we get it wrong and the inspector decides to award costs against us, given the current financial situation we're in, that could be a bike lane, it could be, somebody who's not getting the care that they need, it could be a whole host of things. I think we have to balance up policies that we're presented with the officers' opinions. But I think the reason that we get all of the inspectors' decisions sent to us is so that can be an informative to help us interpret. And I think just in this instance, I really don't like it particularly, and I'd rather refuse it. But I think that the inspector on the previous one was very clear in stating that you've interpreted it wrong and this is how you should have interpreted it. Doesn't matter if we've interpreted it wrong or he has. He's been very clear on how they interpret it. You're right. We could get an inspector that maybe takes a slightly different view, but I think even within the inspector pack, for want of a better word, I think I don't think they like to challenge each other overly. They might interpret things differently, but he's been very clear in his view on the interpretation of it, which I'm sure is probably a shared view. I mean, I'd be interested to see what other councillors say. And I would never roll over to anybody, not even necessarily on financial grounds, although I'm sure I get my hand smacked for saying that. But I think in this instance, we've been given some really clear guidance that the way we interpreted the last one And the reasons we put forward to defend it were not correct. So unless we can come up with some different reasons, and I've looked and thought, and I can't come up with any, I think we'd have to present something different or suffer the consequences.
Thank you, Vince. Roger?
Thank you, Chairman. I hear the comment about the neighbourhood plan and the arguments that were put forward, and obviously the referendum that was carried out for it. But seeking clarification about the present government's intention to increase housing targets. Because if we let that interfere with this planning application, what are we going to do when or if the new local plan is adopted? Because my understanding is that the new local plan, the housing requirement included in that will satisfy all the criteria. The council will have to look at drawing up a new local plan if and when it is adopted, but the new proposed local plan will not need any extra housing included in it to meet all the requirements. That's what the planning officers are telling me. So if we're saying that we should take into consideration the increased targets that the government are setting, and they're the government, they're not going to be included in the new local plan if it is adopted. And there is a big if, and I understand that, but if we're saying that that will now start to interfere in planning applications, what are we going to do for the next few years when, if the new local plan is adopted? So seek clarification about it, because the neighbourhood plan is such, Sandev is such, and if it isn't going to be included, then we need to keep on using the present plan that is there for us to use.
Thank you. Abby, do you want to?
Yeah, just to come back on that, obviously what you've been told by the local plans team is correct, but we have to immediately, and this is subject to the emerging local plan being adopted, get on with a new local plan to find additional housing. So it's not that our one that we've done is incorrect, but we will be having to be, that's what we will be tasked with, is finding the gap in the, you know, to then make up the what we haven't found in our emerging local plan. So it's not incorrect what you're being told, but then the point is that this headline of, well, first of all, what Philip has discussed already about the appeal decision, that this adds weight in that the fact that we have to then find additional housing, and it's something that the government is clear that increase to housing is of importance to them.
Vince?
And that, I think.
Yeah,
I kind of get that, and I understand the point that Roger's making. In a way, to me, it's a bit of a red herring, because the inspector's decision wasn't based on what might be. It was based on they thinking, not their misinterpretation, but they think we've misinterpreted it. Obviously, the emerging plan is always that. The minute we've got one sorted, we're duty bound to start on the next one. And I suspect that any future government targets will impact the next one, because the requirement will be in the next one, but not this one. But, you know, we are where we are. And I think the inspector was very clear with the previous application that was allowed that we hadn't got it right. And I do think we need to take that on board. I do agree with Roger in that, you know, I'm personally not going to give any weight to what the government may say, because we're looking at this now and not after they've said something. After they've said something, that will then influence the work that's being done on the future plan. Is it every 5 years that we've got to refresh it?
Yes.
I think so. Work starts from day one. Of course, we submitted it 18 months ago and we're still waiting and having a bit of a chew on it. But I think anything that the current government do, rightly or wrongly in people's eyes, will influence the next one and not necessarily this one. We can only give some weight to the emerging plan. But I think the inspector in this instance has been very clear. I'm going to move that we support the officer's thoughts on this, because I don't see any other way. I mean, I'd love to
get Shropshire Council to write a letter to the inspector, telling him why he's wrong and what we think about that decision. But I suspect that would probably not do us any favours in the future. We are where we are. Things are going to change. That will affect not the emerging plan, but the future plan, which I'm sure officers are keen to get on with, because until we've got this one through the letterbox, they can't really start work on the next one. But I suspect that that will include a significant increase in housing targets, and that's what they will be directed to work towards. It is what it is, and to coin an old phrase that's been around for years, that some of us who've been here long enough will know, we are where we are.
Thank you. Nat.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think we've had a very good discussion about the legalities and matter of the local plan, and I think while I note the comments to be raised, I think I would be very unhappy to see this going to appeal. There is I think this would be a pretty much known goal for us to do that. The one point I would pick up on, having read through the objectors, I think a landscaping condition, a specific landscaping condition, is probably required, particularly the southern boundary. So that would allow immediately assist in mitigating any noise issues along there. In fact, there are two southern boundaries, and the fact that because we've got a field access, which I believe is all part of the red line area, and so both of those in effect create two lines of noise reduction there and then, and I think that would go a long way to assuaging the issues raised by the neighbour. But on that basis, I would second Councillor Hunt for the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Just
I would be happy to take those conditions on board in my proposal.
Right, is that are we happy with that? Because I think it's a very good idea.
Can I?
Yeah, yes, please.
Well, I hear what you're saying about landscaping. Please remember, this is an outline application only. All matters reserved for future consideration. So the matters that have just been discussed now would come up as part of the reserve matters.
Would you make a note of that though?
So I'm sure the agent will take it on board when the future reserve matters comes forward.
Indeed, but we don't know what the layout is yet. The plan I showed you before was only an indicative plan. That has no weight.
If it is passed, if the agent could take that on board, that would be very helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You took the words out of my mouth.
Well pointed out. Thank you. Okay, but sorry, Ted.
Sorry. Only a second, just being a bit pompous. I find the inspector's decision, the one that's attached to this, particularly disappointing. But I think the bottom line is, if we take a well-used phrase off Councillor Hunt, we are where we are, and I don't see there any real purpose or any possibility of success of refusing this and awaiting an appeal and considerable expense which should come as a result.
Thank you, Ted. I think we all accept what's been said by the discussion by Roger and Julian, and we're all on board with that. But as it's been pointed out by several of you, that it's a fight that we can't win possibly. So I think we've had enough debates on this. So we better have a recorded vote on this, or roll call vote. Yes, please. So all those in no, sorry, Rob, go for it.
Thank you, Chair. We have a proposal to be seconded to approve planning permission in accordance with the officer's recommendation, subject to the conditions set out in the report. And please confirm whether you're for or against the proposal. Roy Alcroft. For. Gary Birchett.
Abstain.
Clark.
Abstain. Yeah. Abstain as a winner.
For.
Julian Dean. For. Jeff Alner. For. Roger Evans.
Abstain.
Jack Green,
Or
Vince Hunt,
For
Paul Wynn.
Well, that's gone through with 3 abstaining, is it?
yes.
Okay, interesting. Thank you very much. That's gone through the officer's recommendation. So right, we can move on to item 7, 9A, Shaw died, Shrewsbury, Shropshire. And it's again.
Thank you. So the application is a non-material amendment to previously approved application 23 /03587/FUL. And the application seeks to remove the chimney breast from the original property. The application is submitted on behalf of Councillor Ed Potter and therefore requires committee determination. You can see the site outlined in red, and the site is located within the settlement of Flowerdine. Next slide. So here are the proposed elevations of the dwelling emitting the chimney breast, which would have been located to. Sorry, I'm going to put the mouse there. Yeah, you can see there where the large chimney would have previously been, and next. And here's the other 2 elevations. Officers consider that the alterations would not materially alter the dwelling, and therefore officers recommend approval.
Thank you, Joanne. Have we got any photographs? You can't be nosy, can you?
It's
I do have photos.
I've got some like come drive with me.
So the point out this is a member of the council, that's why it's misclawed.
Can I just add, this is an non-material amendment application.
Yeah.
So it's pretty straightforward in officers' opinion,
Yes.
and so I'll be respectful to the,
It's a member of the council, that's why it's here for now.
yes, but it's only come because of that, exactly.
So I'll kick off here. I'll propose we go with the officer's recommendation. I have a second. There you go. Any comments? All those in favour, show of hands. Thank you. That's come through. Okay, what's next on the agenda? Appeals and appeal decisions. Any comments?
No.
Nope.
Noted.
Noted.
Nothing remarkable to note the decisions as set out.
Okay. Fix the next meeting. To note the next meeting, the Rural Planning Committee will be held at 2 o'clock on the 15th of October. Shrewsbury, Shirehall, Chew. But what's that? Captain wants to have a word. We just go.
Sorry.